based out of Atlanta, US. And with us, we have Dr. Sumeet Arora. She is an American board certified physician in pediatric endocrinology. And Dr. Sumeet, why don't you take a few seconds to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Preetpal. Good morning, everybody.
My name is Preetpal. I am going to be your host for today. I am not a practicing medical expert. However, I am a health enthusiast. I am based out of Atlanta, US. And with us, we have Dr. Sumeet Arora. She is an American board certified physician in pediatric endocrinology. And Dr. Sumeet, why don't you take a few seconds to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Preetpal. Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining from. I am Dr. Sumeet. I have a background degree of being a pediatrician followed by a pediatric endocrinologist, but I call myself a holistic health leader. I try to inspire people to follow some fitness goals, and this is my passion to talk about diabetes, and that's why we are here. And I do believe in having a holistic approach towards management of diabetes. I don't like to talk much about myself, so I would let Preetpal take over this.
Yeah, no, I appreciate Dr. Sumeet. Dr. Sumeet, I think you understate what you do. Actually, I think I'm a big fan of yours because primarily I've seen while I interact with physicians that they tend to be very busy, and as a result, they have about 5 to 10 minutes with you. But I've seen you spend a little bit more time with the patients. Somewhere between the 45 minutes to an hour long range. So I keep wondering why do you do that, and what's the value in doing something like that? So could you just speak a few words on that?
That's a very good point, Preetpal. When we are looking at diabetes, or for that matter, anybody, like when we're not just treating a disease, we're treating firstly the whole aspect of it, and we're treating the background, what's going on in the family. We're looking at the psychosocial aspects of it. We're looking at nutrition. So all these aspects take some time to explore. When I'm talking to families, does take time to understand what is their nutritional information or background history, and then are they able to sleep well? Are they able to manage their stress well? So there's a lot that goes into not only diabetes but other chronic diseases as well. So it does take a good fair amount of time to explore that when we're sitting when I'm sitting in front of the patients. So yeah.
Oh, very, very interesting. I think we trivialize medicine as a bunch of prescriptions, but I think what you're stressing is that no, medicine and health is actually a discipline not to get to that prescription, and therefore it takes a little while to understand the background and information. So welcome everybody. I think I know that we wanted to speak about this very important topic today called smart eating, right? We've conducted a number of webinars, and this theme kind of resurfaces again and again. While all of us are very interested in knowing what's the latest fad in the medical industry, whether it's a GLP-1 inhibitor or others, you know we normally have seen a lot of people participating in our webinars talk about the basics, right? But there is more to basics, right? So a little bit more insight. So this particular webinar, Dr. Sumeet is going to take us deeper into the valleys of that information and help us, right? So today's topic specifically is around glycemic index and continuous glucose monitoring. I can you go to the next slide, please? I do want to keep some housekeeping things in mind. One is this is a webinar. I absolutely hate I hate spending an hour on a monologue where somebody's just talking about something and I don't get a chance to interact, right? So I would strongly encourage you guys to actually ask questions, and I will personally be moderating those questions. So fire away. Send those questions our way. And, the best way to send those questions is with this in-app messaging, which is on Google Meet, right? The second thing I want to remind before Dr. Sumeet starts talking is this webinar is educational in nature. We are not giving any personalized professional medical advice on this. Reason is very simple. This is an open forum. Medicine as it is practiced, just like Dr. Sumeet talked about. Meghna, I'll answer that in a second. As we do practice medicine, there's a lot of context involved, and without understanding the context, you should not actually take medication or adopt a suggestion. Therefore, this is educational in this thing. Absolutely happy to conduct some follow-on sessions which are complementary in nature, where you can have a physician consult about. We have a fantastic team, including Dr. Sumeet Arora, who have spent quite a bit of time in this field, and they are board certified for similar subjects. Second thing I want to remind is we're not talking type 1, we're not talking LADA, we're not talking gestational diabetes here. This particular webinar is specifically got to do with type 2 only. And please always, I think I see this quite a bit happening on online forums. There's a lot of questions getting posted on Reddit, Quora. There's a lot of short YouTube videos, short Instagram stuff. And it absolutely breaks my heart when somebody goes really, really strongly suggesting one message or the other. And there's often a lot of conflicting point of views in there. So again, whatever advice is out there or whatever we present to you, make sure you consult a physician for your specific diabetes management needs. So with that, let's go to the next slide. And I will pass on the baton to Dr. Sumeet Arora. But before I do that, again, if you want to post questions, just the place where you have posted, just the way Meghna, you posted it here, that's the same place you can write your question. I am the moderator. I'll do my absolute best to get the question. Time may be of essence. If I don't get to it, I promise our team will get to you even in an offline fashion. Over to you, Dr. Sumeet.
Thank you, Preetpal. So I would just like to begin by saying that a lot of times we face challenges as to what really we need to eat so that we're able to manage our diabetes well. And more so because we have to leave a lot of the foods that we really like to eat, and we don't really understand how they impact our glucose levels. That's what we're going to talk about. Then also, what are the off-the-shelf snacks that impact the glucose levels, and HbA1c? What does it really tell us? And is that an enough information that is complete in itself, and we can use that to manage our diabetes well? Next slide, please. So, this is a poll question, and just as a reminder, we have the poll question, like how to answer, Preetpal had mentioned. So what would be your go-to comfort food? Do you really like rice, chapati, or breads or puris? Would it be fruits, or would it be chicken, paneer, or fish, or is it really soups and salad? I can tell you mine is banana. I really like to go to banana especially when I'm feeling a little low.
I personally, I also carbify a lot. So I think number one is where I'm just speaking very vocally about this, but I'm from an Indian descent, and we have a carb problem where we do a lot of fried wheat stuff like that. So I take a variation of number one. So I encourage everybody to vote here. I think that's the same place. If you go on the bottom right corner, there's this thing called activities, and if you go into the polls, you'll see that the question is posted there. The reason we are having these polls is to make it a little bit more informational for all of you guys to actually take advantage, to get a little bit more insight, so that this webinar makes a little bit more sense to you guys. So, all right, Emmanuel, do we have all the polls in, or do we have enough of them in?
Yeah, people have started voting. I can see like people are voting for rice, chapati, and some people are voting for chicken and paneer as well. So I think there's a mixed response from the members here.
Yeah,
we're getting some answers in the chat box.
Chat as well, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, interesting. Some folks are saying, I have a varied selection of choices when I talk about comfort food, right?
Yeah, so it could be either of the three, like 1, 2, 3. Somebody answered 1, 2, 3 also, like so. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Why do we really eat what we eat? So there are so many factors that go into our likings and dislikings. Firstly, what is our culture? What have we been brought up eating? And do we belong to North of India, where the food is typically, the staple food is roti, or South of India, where it's rice? What are the feelings that we have around food when we're about to eat it? So the texture, the look of the food, all these also change the way we feel about it and how we're going to feel full. Or at that time, what is our mood? Do we feel really angry about it, or do we feel happy about it, is going to decide, how much we're going to eat. And then we have our gut-brain interaction. The type of meal, whether it is carbohydrate-based, protein-based, or fat-based, will decide whether we're going to get hungry sooner or later. And then physical activity. If we are more active, we tend to feel fuller with lesser, unhealthier foods are not something we crave very often when we are very active. Next slide, please.
So I think, Dr. Sumeet, I'm curious to ask a few questions on the previous one, right? So I mean, this is my own personal observation, and I'm just trying to make sure that I ask these questions on behalf of the audience as well. Is when I call this phenomenon as carbivoring, right? Which is basically, you're loading up on carbs, and typically what happens is when I carbify the previous day, I wake up very hungry the next day. Or there are specific time during the day when my hunger pangs go up, and these types of phenomenons, right? And then I tend to do a lot of social binge eating. Like, if I go to just this weekend on Friday, we had a birthday celebration, and I was absolutely, when I came back home, I was super guilty. So can you talk a little bit about these phenomenons as it relates to this particular slide?
So oftentimes we feel that, at the time when we're eating, and we tend to overeat on carbs, what happens is there's a significant insulin spike that our body is experiencing. When that spike is significant, or the glucose rise at that time is significant, suddenly, we are going to shut down the other aspects of the metabolism, and then there's going to be a drop in the blood glucose later on because of the high spike in insulin. That often tends to make us eat a lot more, and we're going to get hungry a lot faster. and then we tend to again go back to, okay, now I'm hungry, let me eat a little more. So it's a vicious cycle. So we ate a high glycemic index food or food that is very processed, and then ultimately we threw ourselves in this cycle of, okay, I'm hungry again, and so those cravings that keep coming in. So that's what carbs, especially which are simple carbs, do to us.
No, very interesting. Yeah, I mean, please go ahead. Let's go to the next one.
So what are the foods that impact the blood glucose, or how do foods really impact the blood glucose on insulin levels? And I would like to ask everybody here in the audience, like, what do they think, how their glucose has been impacted, especially if somebody has diabetes, if they can answer. And that brings us to the next question, which is our poll question. What type of foods would give the blood glucose a spike? Would it be rice, bread, chapati, banana, or you've never noticed, or do you think they're all of the above?
Right. Hey guys, I noticed that maybe some of you guys may be finding it a little bit challenging to vote on this poll. I think something did pop up on the right bottom corner of the screen. If not, if you go to the right bottom corner, if you're not on a mobile app, right? If you're on a mobile app, then you click those three dots and go to activities and it'll be there. You can still, you can post your answer in the message window, but if you feel like you want to vote on the poll, you can flip over to the activities at bottom right hand corner, right? So there's a triangle, a square, and a circle. You can go there and there's polls over there and you can vote over there.
So rice, bread, somebody answered rice, bread.
Yeah, and in the chat, doctor, somebody has mentioned all of the above mentioned.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do we have the polls answered? Like majority of the people answered it.
Yeah. I see votes for rice now. Yeah.
Emmanuel, I'm going to ask you in a second, what was the poll result of the first one, which we did, right? As well.
Yeah. I think, doctor, there's like rice and all of the above mentioned. And in the chat, people have mentioned rice, bread. Yeah. I think there's a mixed answer there.
Yeah.
I think while we're processing these things, I also want to mention some of the challenges I face is, the moment you show some interest in a topic like health, your Instagram, your YouTube feeds, they're all filled up with suggestions and all that, right? I honestly find it very confusing, right? Because I see one reel, it's praising, for example, peanut butter to the heaven, right? And the very next one is saying, you know what, peanut butter is the worst thing human beings can ever eat, right? Because they have too much saturated fat, this or that, right? So I find this question a little bit confusing. The basic information, hey, what causes blood glucose spikes, right? I think the answer, I'd love to hear your, Dr. Sumeet, your perspective. The answer might be a little bit more, interesting than what is on the surface here.
So the next few minutes, actually, I want to spend a little more time on how food plays a big role in the impact on blood glucose. So we can divide our food groups into majorly three categories. So it'll be carbohydrates, protein, and fat. Of course, we're eating a meal, but if we divide them into major groups, so carbohydrates have the maximum impact on the blood glucose, which is seen in the first 3 hours of eating food. Then it's protein and fat that comes a little later, and usually the impact is not as much. However, if we eat too much of protein and too much of fat in one go, that also can cause a delayed spike, and that spike of blood glucose, which can actually happen a little later, about 4 to 6 hours later as well. And when we talk about just carbohydrates or a meal containing carbohydrates, there is much more to it than this. And then we talk about glycemic index, which brings on the next slide, please.
Yeah, but can you go back to that previous slide? I do want to encourage the audience to ask questions right here, right? Maybe you guys can post your questions, right? But a lot of this particular graph is, I would also imagine, Dr. Sumeet, is pretty controversial as well. And why I say that is, you see all these ketogenic proponents out there. They tend to quote this graph and they say, well, carbs is really bad. Look at the graph. Carb has the highest spike and fat is so good. It's so tapered long term, right? And then so therefore ketogenic, right? Therefore, eat a high fat diet and this and that, right? So, is this graph misleading in that sense that, hey, What are your thoughts, right? I mean,
Yeah.
this is a typical graph which actually has lots of things thrown around.
Preetpal, you're opening a can of worms. So this is a Pandora box that's going to open up. So, okay, I'll try to keep my answer as short as possible, unless audience wants to go the route of the ketogenic diet. So yes, this figure does mention that fat does not impact the blood glucose as much, and carbohydrates have the maximum impact on the blood glucose. But we do have to understand that carbohydrates are providing us with energy and energy to do like whatever we're doing in our lives. Now, we do need to balance this energy intake and energy expenditure. So, if I were to talk about a person who is less than 20 years old, their energy intake or energy comes majorly from carbohydrates, especially when they're growing and when they have to go through puberty and all those things. But after 20 years or maybe 25, 30 years, there's a slowdown of the resting energy metabolism that is there. So the requirement of carbohydrates also go down. When we talk about in general, there is all over the world, there is a larger amount of aspect of the meal that goes to carbohydrates. So majorly, if we talk about India, 60% of our diet consists of carbohydrate, and that is what we needs to be changed. And that is what people need to understand, that we're eating too much of carbohydrates, whereby we do need to optimize it, but doesn't mean we need to go to extremely low carbohydrates. So with that, I'll talk about the ketogenic diet. So when we're going to ketogenic diet, we're going extremely low carbohydrate intake, which basically means if I were to eat 2 chapatis in a day, that is it. That is my carbohydrates. I cannot eat a fruit. I cannot have dairy. I cannot have yogurt. So that leads to a lot of mineral deficiencies or vitamin deficiencies. So of course, then you end up eating supplements. But apart from that, if we use ketogenic diet as a long term for weight loss, then it can also impact the cholesterol levels. So the long term effects, we're not sure how it's going to affect the cardiovascular outcomes or problems with our heart, basically. So we do not really, I'm not a proponent of ketogenic diet. I'm still waiting for the literature to show me otherwise.
No, that's very insightful, Dr. Sumeet. And we got a 10-minute section at the end where we're gonna have a lot of questions. But Ajoy actually asked a question, and he was wanting to understand on the previous graph, right? So sugars, right? I mean sugars. So can you talk a little bit about those carbohydrates? You're representing that carbohydrate as a monolith, but there are complex sugars, complex carbs, simple carbs. There are sugars within that, right? So his question is, around sugar, right? So sweets and desserts, right? Can you talk a little bit about why that graph looks like a pyramid and not like a plateau?
Yeah, so that actually brings on, that's a very good question, and thank you for asking that. So that brings us to the next slide, and we're going to talk more about it. So that is where the glycemic index comes into picture. What is glycemic index? And there's so much news about it, and there's so much information about it, and sometimes it really gets confusing as to what really to eat and what not to eat. Let me begin by answering the question, what is exactly glycemic index? Glycemic index is how fast the glucose rises once something is eaten. So for example, if something is eaten in a or we drink liquid, or we eat some sweetened beverages, then it will spike the sugar really fast. Or if we're eating a fruit, that will break down the blood sugars very quickly, and so then we're going to have another spike. Or if we're eating, say for example, some very highly processed food like bread or cornflakes, again they have a very high glycemic index. Whereas if you're eating pulses also have carbohydrates, they do have proteins, so they have a lower glycemic index. Similarly, there is a way to design our meal in a certain way where we can lower the glycemic index of a meal without really giving up on the foods that we like.
So essentially what you're saying, Dr. Sumeet, is this is akin to a dam, right? So let's say you dam a major river, right? So a glycemic index is the rate at which you release the water, right? I mean, if you release too much too quickly, there is going to be flooding down in the valley. And that's essentially what glycemic index is doing, except that we do that year over year, 10 years at a time. Every single day, we open the dam too much, too quickly, and that causes flooding down in the valley. Is that a good way to explain that?
Somewhat, yes. So when our the molecules that a food is made of, if it's broken down very quickly, yes, it'll spike the sugars very quickly. But if it's a complex carbohydrate, it has fiber in it, it has, we're combining it with protein, it'll form a mesh and not let those carbohydrates be absorbed very quickly. And that's when we don't see that spike of blood sugar.
And therefore, what you're saying is like simple sugar, like sugars. And I was reading somewhere there are 29 names for sugar. There's literally 29 names of sugar. So those are they're like the quick burning fuel inside your body, that's why they have a high glycemic index, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Please go ahead. Let's go to the next one.
So like I mentioned, there are very simple ways to improve the glycemic index of a meal, and you don't really need to give up all of the likings that you have or the staple diet that you eat. So when we begin our food by eating a salad, we follow it with protein, for example yogurt, or if somebody is a non-vegetarian, chicken or fish, and then you eat your rice. That's called meal order and sequence. The likelihood of your blood sugar spiking or the glycemic index of your meal will lower, and you're not going to have a post-meal rise in your blood sugar. So it's very important that we even people who do not have diabetes follow this meal order and sequence, so that we also feel fuller for longer duration of time. And also avoiding highly processed food. The more processed a food is, the faster it will work. So the breads, like white breads, they spike the blood sugar very quickly. So instead we should use other kinds of grains or other special types of breads, which we'll talk about, which will not lead to that significant spike.
Again, I encourage the audience to ask questions. Please, ask questions. One question which comes to my mind is, Dr. Sumeet, how do you identify processed food? Like, what are some of the simple day-to-day ways to identify processed food?
So my simple way to explain is, like, the more white it is, the more processed it is. So the more grainy, the more coarse, the more fuller it is. There is more fiber in it, and then yes, it's more complex and it's less processed.
And is everything which comes wrapped in a plastic, is that considered?
All of them are, yes, definitely, yes, absolutely.
But are there like there's pretty much a fad right now in America? I go hiking or whatever, people are carrying these protein bars which they wrap, pull out of a wrapper and then eat it quickly. And I look at it in a suspicious way, because they are sweet, but they say it's a protein bar, so they have the element of sweetness. And I'm questioning myself, should I have this or just chug along with something else, right?
Yeah, so that's a very good point. So we do have to understand how to read nutrition labels. We do need to look at the ingredients, what all is there in it. So apart from whatever protein they used, are they using something else? Is there hidden sugars that are not named as sugar, but they're named as, I don't know, glucose, fructose, maltose, malitol. A lot of other names that they have, high con fructose sugar. So there is coconut sugar, or a lot of them that are there, and that will spike the blood glucose. And along with that, they may have added some amount of protein, and it's called a protein bar.
Yeah. So for sake of time, just checkpointing. Time check is, we have about 25 more minutes, right? So we can keep going.
Sure. Okay, so that's a poll question. Which bread would be best suited for people with diabetes? I gave some hints. So white bread, whole wheat bread, multigrain bread, Ezekiel bread, sourdough bread.
Yeah, I see people voted for multigrain bread, sourdough bread. Okay.
So bread is the most convenient breakfast actually. This is very, very important because when you don't have time, when you're short of time, you just tend to go and eat, a bread and egg or, a bread and butter.
I mean, if you go to a grocery store like Kroger or even Costco, or you go to Publix or even the healthy stores, entire lines of breads, right? And I feel like the exact same bread brand, which is Nature's Own honey wheat, that's the most like boom right there in your eyes. Perceptively you're salivating on that, like because you like the taste or whatever, right? So this is an interesting question, like from that perspective.
So we have whole wheat, multigrain.
Yeah, but people have voted for multigrain, Ezekiel, and sourdough bread.
Do we have a percentage?
Yeah, like 70% sourdough bread and like 10% Ezekiel, and the remaining is multigrain bread.
How much was sourdough? Sorry,
70%. 70% sourdough.
Okay. Okay. So let me just talk about the first three first. So white bread, whole wheat bread, and multigrain bread. We do have to understand, yes, white bread is, completely taken out of the fiber is completely gone. It's highly processed. But also whole wheat. Firstly, we do really need to find out whether it is 100% whole wheat or not. Oftentimes when we talk about whole wheat, they're going to brand it in that way, but not always will it have 100% whole wheat in it. But also whole wheat bread and oftentimes even multigrain bread, they give a very high glucose spike because they're also very highly processed. When that multigrain may not have as many as other grains or millets, that will lower the glucose spike. So you really have to go and look at the ingredients. Do they have a lot of seeds? Is the grain in it like very coarse textured? That will lower the glycemic index of that multigrain bread. So the first three do tend to rise the blood glucose very fast. When we talk about Ezekiel bread, now this bread is a sprouted bread made from whole grains and legumes. It does tend to have a much lower glycemic index, so it's preferred over the other breads. So my answer would be that. But I want to spend some time in talking about sourdough bread too. Now, sourdough bread is made from natural fermentation, and when we use the type of flour that we use to make this sourdough bread will decide the glycemic index. So fermentation, yes, it helps with the digestive processes, and it really improves the nutrient value of the bread, but it may not always be very favorable when we're talking about glycemic index. So you'll have to look at what flour is it made of. Is it made of 100% whole wheat or not, or have they added sometimes rye bread is much better when they're using rye bread with that process of natural fermentation that will help with the glycemic index. So yes, Ezekiel and sourdough, if it is made in a certain way, they will have lower glycemic index.
So I mean, I know time check again, right? We got about 20 more minutes left in the thing, but I just want to make sure that to a layman like me, what you're trying to say is what you said before is increasing the fibrous content, increasing the protein, increasing the coarseness of the grain actually blunts the glycemic index, right? Although if you read the label, like here we're reading, it's sort of the same, except the difference is the amount of fiber and protein.
Yeah, so there is an important point that Megan has made. Ezekiel bread is not wheat bread, it's more than that. So that's what we are trying to do. What we want is, our grains to have lower glycemic index. So be it, roti, be it rice, be it breads, when we're managing diabetes, if we have glycemic index that's well controlled, or even for that matter, if we're trying to control the weight, if all these things are put together, then definitely it helps with the glycemic index being lowered. There's going to be lesser insulin spikes, and that does help with the diabetes aspect and the weight loss.
Yeah. So for sake of time, thank you so much. Right. So for sake of time, we'll skip the next poll question, but go on to the next slide. Yeah. Okay. So what are we talking about here, Dr. Sumeet?
So similarly, white rice, people don't want to give up white rice, but they're asked to not eat it once they have diabetes. And it's very important to understand that, when we give up our foods and likings in certain way that we've grown up eating, oftentimes we're not able to sustain it for very long. And we tend to go back on our previous old habits. So if we use glycemic index and lower the glycemic index of the white rice itself, again, it will help. So how can we do that? Of course, we know about brown rice, which has a lower glycemic index. If we use parboiled rice, again, that will have a lower glycemic index. Now, long grain basmati rice also has lower glycemic index compared to the shorter grain basmati rice. So basically what we're doing is we're choosing white rice, which will have lower glycemic index and still be able to enjoy those. And once we follow that meal order and sequence, where we're eating the salad first, then we're eating the protein, and then we are eating the carbs and the protein, again, that glucose spike is not going to be there as much.
So, I mean, Dr. Sumeet, this is fantastic. It's very insightful, but I will admit this is pretty confusing, right? So, when nobody would have the time or the patience to get down to that level of minutiae, right? So, I think at some point you might have to address that piece. How do you make this simple enough for us average human beings to actually do the right thing for our health?
Yeah. I mean, if when you go to your supermarket, just look at which one is long grain basmati rice, as simple as that. Or look at if this was the process of parboiled was used for this kind of long grain basmati rice, again, that will lower the glycemic index. People don't like to eat brown rice, in my experience. They'll eat it for some time and then ultimately go back to eating their white rice. So rather use these kinds of, and long grain basmati rice has a very good aroma. So if we can use that and use the meal order and sequence, and we will definitely be able to help with the blood glucose spike.
Now, this is Dr. Sumeet. Just a forward commentary on this, like a preface commentary, right? I have been in so many sit-ups and like dinner conversations and all that, especially in that age group of 50 to 70. And I mean, I see people hacking around sugar, like, oh, I think this particular sugar from coconut or stevia or this or that. Like, so this is very interesting as a question, right?
I'm all ears or all open to like what the audience has to say too. So what is better for my diabetes control? Would you rather have jaggery, honey, sugar or artificial sweeteners? So somebody already answered none of the above. I would like to know more, Ajoy, if you can, unmute and tell us, educate us. Maybe it'll be nice to hear your insights into it, and it would be nice to have somebody else talk.
Yeah, I think for me, 1 to 3 would definitely spike your sugar, blood glucose. But 4 may not spike your blood sugar necessarily, but causes a whole bunch of other problems. Health-wise.
Would you want to tell us more?
My understanding is there's a lot of artificial products used in there that can cause a wide variety of health problems. So not necessarily diabetic, but those problems could create additional problems for your diabetic condition.
I completely agree with that. So yes, good. No matter, like, maybe let's hear the poll questions first, and then the answers first, and then we'll talk about it.
Yes, doctor. So most of the people have voted for artificial sweeteners.
Okay, all right.
That's the result.
Yeah, so I'm so glad that this audience does understand that good is not an alternative to sugar. Good has an equally high glycemic index. It will rise the blood sugar as much. And similarly, honey. Now, these are simple sugars. They will absorb very quickly. So even though they're a natural substitute in terms of good and honey, but they will still rise your blood sugar significantly. So those are not good alternatives when we're talking about replacement. Let's talk about artificial sweeteners. So yes, they do not cause as much of a spike, or they may not cause a spike at all. But like Ajoy, you have mentioned, it is very important to understand that if they're eaten in their permissible limits, they have not been shown to have significant harm, but there are newer studies that are coming out that are showing that the degree of sweetness that they have is almost close to 600 to 1000 times that of the sugar. And they're actually, there are sweet receptors that are present in the insulin producing cells in the pancreas, and so they're not helping with our sweet cravings. Actually, they're making it worse. And on top of that, there are unhealthy they're leading to unhealthy gut bacteria. So they're altering the gut microbiome, and that's eventually leading to more harm. So yes, I completely agree with the fact that artificial sweeteners may not be the best thing, but if it's a occasional, if you want to occasionally indulge in something which is once in a week or so, then that's fine, you can use it.
Dr. Sumeet, can you repeat the artificial sweetener info that you just finished talking about, the last paragraph? I just
So
wanted to hear it again.
it's actually altering the gut microbiome. So we have some good bacteria in our body, and they alter it. So these are more recent studies that have shown this, that when we're using artificial sweeteners more regularly, then they change the internal good bacteria, and so eventually in the long run they're more harmful.
So I think I want to, yeah, cool. So I want to, Dr. Sumeet, you talked a lot about label reading. It's a full-time job. No, I'm kidding. Maybe you want to talk a little bit about label reading here. What are we discussing here?
Yeah, so when we go to the market, we tend to buy those sugar-free cookies. So a lot of my patients do come back and tell me that, okay, we bought, don't worry, we're good. We bought those sugar-free cookies. They're not going to spike the blood sugar. But we do have to understand what's in that. We do need to know what are the total carbohydrates that are there. So if you look at these two labels, you can look at the sugars. One has 4 grams and one has 0 grams. And if you look at the total carbohydrates, one is 14 grams and the other one is 15 grams, the one which is 0 gram sugar. So the amount of carbohydrates in a sugar-free cookie is almost the same as or sometimes even more as a normal sugar-containing cookie. So it may not be very beneficial, and we do want to understand that a cookie is a very highly processed carbohydrate, so it will give its glucose spike. And if you can go to the next slide, I want to show something. So this is ragi cookies. So the 0% sugar ragi cookies, loved by everyone, and people are so happy to get it. Now, if you look at the ingredients, it's very, very important to look at the ingredients. 33% have ragi flour, then there is 28% of it is refined wheat flour, and then we have maltodextrin. So basically we have the maida, we have ragi. Ragi again is a high glycemic index type of grain, so it will give its glucose spike also. It will actually cause a higher glucose spike than when you're eating your whole wheat cookie or an oat based cookie. So we have to be very careful when we buy these snacks off the shelf.
Yeah, I think an important thing to remember there is, right, like out of those 29 names of sugar, one of them is maltodextrin, right? And I think, reading that 29 names is very important. But interesting point there as well is, a shameless plug for the platform Heald. So we have built a functionality within the platform where if you actually click the photograph of this particular cookie, it'll help you understand what's really in the label, right? So just letting you know, but very, very interesting, right? I find it difficult when I go to my favorite grocery store and I flip the label and I'm saying, oh no, man, like how do I process it, right? So this is still an open question for a lot of us, but great insights, Dr. Sumeet. I think, can you summarize?
Yeah, so ultimately, when we do want to enjoy the eating process, we don't really want to give up everything that we like, but we also want to manage diabetes, and we do want to make sure the sugar is well controlled. So few ways that we could do it is, by lowering the glycemic index of every meal, we can have a significantly improved overall glucose control. And the way you could do that is, following that meal order and sequence, we can choose complex carbohydrates that are more natural, more home-based type of foods. And then we do have to make sure that whenever we are buying something off the shelf, which is, the packet foods, look at the ingredients, make sure that you look at the hidden names of sugars as well. So I would,
No, I appreciate that, Dr. Sumeet. And I think, we're crunched for time. I will probably ask the audience if you can message in there. Is it okay to go 5 more minutes? Otherwise, we'll try to wind up in the next 10 minutes, right? I think quickly shifting topics, Dr. Sumeet. I know this is a subject which is very close to your heart, which is called data and data insights, right? So we are now, I think we're pivoting away from food to something else, which is very, very insightful, right? So what are we talking about here, Dr. Sumeet?
So we'll talk about sugars. How frequently is it needed to check? What is the role of HbA1c here? So I'll just talk about a real life example. So this is a 30-year-old female with diabetes, and she was checking her blood sugars roughly about 2 times and sometimes 3 times a day, and her readings showed that her fastings were 82 and her post meals were roughly between 128 to 140 and occasional 165. And I would, pat her on the back, right?
That looks very nice. 82 for fasting and 180, 160 max for post dinner.
Which is quite good. I mean, it's quite good for a person who has diabetes. But let's look at what her HbA1c showed. Well, it was really surprising when her HbA1c came back as 9.1%. And following that, yes, she did agree to get a continuous glucose monitoring sensor that was placed. And, this is, if you can go to this is what it showed. If you look at these mountains are the ones telling us how high the blood sugar was, and these occasional reds that are dipped that are showing the low blood sugars. 50% of the time the blood sugars were above 200 to 50, and that was giving us the HbA1c of 9.1%, which we were missing in the reading itself. So the point to be stressed here is, we sometimes cannot completely rely on just a fasting and a post-meal blood glucose, especially when we are on insulin, especially when we are on multiple medications, especially when the HbA1c is more than 7.5 to 8. There is a need to check more often than that, and oftentimes because it's not that convenient, it is best to place a continuous glucose monitoring sensor where you don't really need to prick so many times, but you have the overall day-to-day sugar readings in front of you.
Well, very interesting. So basically, it's just fate here. I would call this a fate slide, that somebody was timing the pinprick at the right time, but the graph actually saying something else. Am I reading it right? It was all the way going to 350s, and then wow.
So this is actually not a very not an uncommon scenario at all, I would say. Like if an HbA1c is 7.5 or 8, or if a person is already on insulin, they do really need to check more often than that. And it's just that we tend to be more, we don't really want to check that much, and it's very difficult, and we take it as a task. So that's why we don't know these hidden sugars that are rising in our body. But I mean, that's how that's the real information. So when we're checking few times a day, it's more of a snapshot, whereas the CGM is more of a real picture that is going on, or a film that is going on in our body. Let's talk about the HbA1c aspect of it. So when we talk about a 7% HbA1c, it is not just a good number what we give, like, okay, your diabetes is well controlled. It could be an average of very high and very low blood sugar. So if you're getting like 50% of the time the blood sugars are 250s, and 50% of the time your blood sugars are very low, like 60s, 50s, then again the average over a period of 3 months, which is the HbA1c, will still come back as normal. So sometimes HbA1c doesn't give us a complete picture. Or if your blood sugars are for most part in the normal range, again it will come back as an average of 7%. So we cannot completely rely on an HbA1c and not check at all. And that's where the role of checking and having a CGM sensor, especially if your HbA1c has been higher, or recently you're seeing that the fasting and post meals are going higher, we do need to start to check more often. So there are other factors that also involve an HbA1c, so affect the HbA1c. It could be hemoglobin. If there is anemia, if there is chronic kidney disease, again that can impact the HbA1c as well. Sorry, you were saying?
Sorry, Dr. Sumeet. I got excited, right? Can you go back to the previous slide? So what are you? I mean, like, are you saying so in English language, right? I mean, as a layman, right? Are you saying that the glucose storms we cause in within our body by eating high glycemic food, or also go into that fasted state and have hypoglycemia where we fall? You're saying HbA1c, when I say 7%, is an average of both, like, and therefore if these two phenomena are happening within the body, which is glucose storm, which is also bad, and also like hypo type episode, which is also bad, that the averages of it will negate out, and you'll be happy that you have a 7% A1C. Is that what you're saying? And the question one and question two is, which of these graphs is really the ideal graph for a human being to achieve?
Right. So exactly. If a lot of times we're having those glucose storms in the body, as you call it, and then rest of the times you're having lower sugars, then it will average out to be an HbA1c, which is falsely normal. So why we have a 3 months average is, so HbA1c, the full form is glycated hemoglobin, and it is dependent on the hemoglobin because our body metabolizes the red blood cells every 3 months. That's why it gives us an average of 3 months. So if the average, if you have a higher blood sugar sometimes, and if you have a lower blood sugar, again, the average is going to come back as normal. So to answer to your first question, yes, if the blood sugars are, in a perfectly normal state, or if they're very high, very low, again, the average comes back as a good HbA1c of 7%. The second question, which one do we want to use? So the first graph, of course not. The third one, 100% in range, is practically very difficult to achieve. But the second graph is where we really need to focus. So if your blood sugars are between 70 to 180, 70% of the day, and your low blood sugars are less than 4% of the day, then we're having a good control. So we don't really need to worry much in terms of long-term complications.
Cool. Let's go to the next slide. 1 minute left. I would request the audience just be patient. We'll go over by 5 minutes so that we give you an opportunity to ask questions.
So we did cover this, that if you are checking more often, if you have a CGM, it does give you an opportunity to actually closely monitor what kind of foods are affecting your glucose levels, and you can change or alter the foods accordingly. At the same time, if you have an early diagnosis of diabetes, or if you're in the first 5 to 8 years, oftentimes you're able to cut down on your insulin doses or on some medications by monitoring more closely, by making sure that the other aspects are taken care of, which will control the diabetes, and at the same time it will avoid a low sugar as well.
Yeah. So can you summarize all of your thoughts till now? What are we like kind of summarizing this whole thoughts into?
Yeah. So, I mean, if you can go to the next slide also. So what would be the recipe of a good diabetes control? Of course, a big part of it is nutrition, where what is our evolutionary biology, what is our metabolism. We need to create a nutritional recipe based on that. We do want to make sure that stress and sleep or other variables that are affecting the glucose levels are taken care of. And a big part of it whereby you're able to manage your diabetes well is self-monitoring of blood glucose. If you're able to check more often or have a CGM sensor placed, you're able to look at it, what's going on, and you can take your action accordingly. So with that, I would just, call it a day and I'm open to questions because we're running out of time.
Yeah, I mean, guys, please post your questions. And if you don't, I mean, we see that, people a little bit introvert on a public forum. If you feel that same way, you're not feeling very comfortable asking questions, we can have one-on-one sessions as well as needed. Just reach out to the team. One question which is coming up from slide number 27, which you just shared. 27 is the recipe for good diabetes control. Isn't that too much, doctor? Isn't that like I need to be in a jailhouse to actually achieve that?
So initially, like if you talk about overall our own lifestyle, let's not talk about diabetes. Don't we really want to live a little, live in a healthy way? We want to make sure that what we're eating is really what we need in terms of what our body needs. We do want to make sure that physical activity has to go. We do want to make sure that, we're taking care of that stress and sleep aspect of it. So these three, the first three is, a day-to-day routine for anybody who's, does not have diabetes as well. But yes, the self-monitoring of blood glucose is quite a task, and that's why technology has advanced so much, and we have the option of using CGM sensors if it's not a barrier in terms of affordability and other things. But then it does really help to check more often so that you're able to go down on the doses. And then we do have experts that as a team, when there is hand holding that helps you, there is support that you have, there's a team of experts to guide you, then it makes it much easier to manage this.
I think Meghna made it in a nice way, right? And I think I've had these discussions with you in the past as a Dr. Sumeet is, and I think the way you responded in one of my conversations is like, so you go to Instagram and YouTube, you hear whatever, peanut butter, stevia, agave, nectar, whatever you hear, right? And there's one camp which is really, beating the horns of it. Another one is, basically bad mouthing it. So what do I do? Like, I mean, I think the problem is, can you, I think you talked about, hey, if higher up can you talk a little bit about some of the simple things for eating, like, and not get into this whole fad about seeing too much on Instagram and YouTube and somebody praising this or that.
So let's be very simple. I'll just talk about what I eat and how I eat. And, I'm also inspired by my patients because, when you talk so much to them, you realize, that is a better way to eat. And I do not have diabetes as of now, but, that is still how I'm living is, I make my meal into a thali. So like, those Indian thalis, that concept I use. So there is salad, which is eaten first, then there is yogurt, then there is vegetables that are non-starchy, then we go to either dal or any other sort of protein, and then I combine the roti and rice with the dal or the sabji or vegetable, whatever I want to eat. Now I may not want to eat that much of roti or rice if my activity has not been much, but if we just follow this basic rule of eating in a thali version, in a thali format, it really helps with the glucose control. So that is one thing, or one simple thing we could do. Another thing is, when we're wanting to eat a snack, which is, in between those meals, it is better to go for those peanuts or, the lentils that are roasted. So that, again, these are low glycemic index type of snacks. They're also crunchy. So then it also helps with satiety. It helps to make you feel better that, okay, you ate something crunchy. But again, it will not really lead to those glucose spikes. So, I mean, those are two things that I would.
That's fantastic. And I'll take two questions. I know we are over the time, right? Krish has one, right? But I think I wanted to summarize your second point is basically, in one of the conversations you said to me, look, people just go up the food chain, like, pull something out of Mother Earth, like a carrot or something, eat it by washing it, and try not to go down the value chain of food where, that carrot is getting more and more processed, where it ends up as a puree or something in a bottle, and then you're drinking it, right, rather than eating that carrot. So that was the other thing, like stay closer to Mother Nature rather than away from Mother.
Yes. And very well put. Yes, absolutely.
So the question Krish is asking is around trans fat, right? Is it always harmful?
Absolutely.
Is it always harmful? What is the direct impact on diabetes?
So thank you, Krish, for asking that. So trans fats are always harmful. They are the ones that are leading to building plaque, which are the ones that are eventually leading to heart attack. So yes, trans fats is something that completely needed to be avoided. Now, when you talk about direct impact on diabetes in itself causes cholesterol problems or dyslipidemias or problems with your cholesterol, to keep it simple. Trans fat is something that you get from what you eat. So all these cookies that we talked about, most of them have trans fat. Any snack that you have in the packet form that have palm oil, again, all of them have trans fat. That will eventually lead to our risk for future heart attacks. And on top of that, if you have diabetes, your risk is, much higher. So that's where we really need to completely avoid trans fat.
Yeah. And again, I'll go back to Meghna's question, right? Which is, I mean, so I'm just gonna have a lighter fun with Meghna's question along with this is like, there's like the carbon long chains, right? And there are 4 types of fats, polyunsaturated, unsaturated, and blah, 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 right? I mean, I can't keep, like, I have to refer to my dictionary as to what these fats are. And I read somewhere that just by virtue of you actually heating up an oil, a perfectly good fat which is on room temperature has a certain way, you splice that carbon chain and you make it into trans fat, right? So meaning what I'm trying to say here is that there's so much of technicalities and complexities in these types of phenomena that instead of focusing on those low level technicalities or this thing, right, using some of these simple tricks, would probably make a lot more sense, right?
Yeah. So if we go back to our basics, go back to the mustard oil, the groundnut oil, the rice bran oil, and keep it alternating. Keep it simple. That works beautifully for us. And those are the ones that have higher MUFA and PUFA. So they're really good for us to eat.
How did we end up with vegetable oil in that case? I guess the marketing infrastructure at work here.
Exactly. Yes.
So I think that the very good takeaway is, that concept of a plate and the proportionality in that plate, and then staying closer to Mother Nature and what she produces is the key to good health, and not getting caught up in these technicalities of, I heated this oil and now the carbon chains got spliced and now it is looking like a trans-saturated fat or this fat or that fat, right? I mean, that makes sense, right?
Yeah, and not using not reheating the oils is what we need to do. So if you've already used it once, we should not be reheating them.
I think Meghna is putting very interesting questions which can easily become trivia questions for next one. 29 names of sugar, give me all the names of trans fat which I see on a label and all that. So just so you know, again, a shameless plug, if you download the app, we have a food analyzer functionality in there. I think, you'll be able to get a lot of that information from there as well from us. But these are good trivia questions. We'll post them on our community forum to actually let you know what are the 29 different names of sugars and trans fats, different types and formats in which they exist. And you can use that information next time you're in a grocery store reading a label.
It's a very simple answer. So this is trans fat is usually, labeled as trans fat in most nutrition labels. So it's a good thing that there is a regulatory body that has been that is taking charge there, and trans fat is supposed to be mentioned in each nutrition label, and so they do mention 0% or whatever. So good thing is that we do have that in place.
Yeah. Meghna, we'll post the link tree of the platform. I think we strongly recommend Raman, if you can post the link tree of the whole platform, she can find on App Store, Android or Apple, where you can find the app, right? There's no cost to use it. I mean, you can use it; it's for free. It's just that we normally say that, hey, our care team does a fantastic job at helping you navigate through the platform. So, but you can use it anytime for login. So yeah, that's the link. So with that, I really apologize. We're 12 minutes over, but fantastic comment, Dr. Sumeet. It's always a challenge, when you have so much of information and depth. Time becomes a constraint, right? So we appreciate you spending time with us on this topic. I'm sure you'll be coming back again and again and talking at depth about this thing. I felt like the latter half of the presentation had a lot more quote unquote technical information, which probably will get a lot of these folks excited. So we'll probably conduct one more session and we'll flip the order on these. So guys, thank you so much for joining. Appreciate it.
Thank you everyone, and thank you for being here this morning.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.